Someone is coming back to finish what they started, but perhaps the real question is not whether someone from your past will return. The deeper question is what this return means for your heart, your growth, and the love you once shared. Sometimes people leave without truly finishing the emotional story between you. They walk away because they are confused, afraid, immature, overwhelmed, or simply not ready to understand what they were feeling. They may convince themselves that leaving is easier than facing the depth of their emotions, but distance does not always erase connection. Sometimes it only creates enough silence for a person to finally hear what their heart was trying to tell them all along. And perhaps that is why this message is finding you now. Maybe there is someone who disappeared, someone who walked away without giving you the closure you deserved, someone who left conversations unfinished, promises incomplete, feelings unspoken, or a relationship suspended somewhere between what it was and what it could have become. You may have spent nights wondering whether they ever think about you, whether they regret leaving, whether they remember the moments you shared, or whether they secretly wish they could return and do things differently. But before we talk about someone coming back, we need to understand something important about love. Love is not always finished simply because contact ends. A relationship can end while emotions remain unresolved. A person can leave your life while still carrying pieces of your presence inside their memory. And sometimes people need distance to recognize the value of what they had. When someone is constantly available, their presence can become familiar, almost invisible. But when that presence disappears, the mind begins to compare the emptiness with the comfort that once existed. Psychology tells us that absence can increase awareness because the brain notices changes in emotional patterns. When someone who once occupied a significant part of your daily life suddenly becomes absent, your mind naturally begins processing the missing connection. That does not automatically mean someone will return, but it explains why people sometimes understand feelings only after losing access to the person who brought those feelings into their life. Maybe this person once took your love for granted. Maybe they assumed you would always be there. Maybe they thought they could walk away and eventually replace the connection. But time has a strange way of revealing the difference between temporary attraction and emotional significance. People can meet many people, but not everyone creates emotional safety. Not everyone understands their silence. Not everyone remembers the small things. Not everyone makes them feel seen. And sometimes the person someone leaves behind becomes the person they compare everyone else to. You may never know how many times your memory has appeared in their mind. You may never know how many songs, places, conversations, or ordinary moments have reminded them of you. But what matters most is not whether they remember you. What matters is who you have become while they were gone. Because if someone comes back, they should not be returning to the same version of you they left behind. They should meet someone wiser, stronger, more emotionally aware, and more capable of protecting their own heart. Your growth is important because love should never be an excuse to abandon yourself. Sometimes we become so focused on whether someone will return that we forget to ask whether the person returning is actually capable of loving us differently. Someone coming back is not automatically a blessing. Sometimes the blessing is finally understanding why they had to leave. Sometimes the blessing is realizing that you deserved better. Sometimes the blessing is receiving the apology you waited for. Sometimes the blessing is getting another opportunity to love each other with maturity. And sometimes the blessing is being strong enough to say, I loved you, but I cannot return to what hurt me. That is emotional growth. That is self-respect. That is understanding love beyond fantasy. So if someone from your past is coming back, do not immediately assume that their return means you must reopen the relationship. Pause. Breathe. Observe. Listen to their words, but pay even more attention to their actions. A person can say, I miss you, but missing someone is not the same as being ready to build with them. A person can say, I made a mistake, but recognizing a mistake is not the same as changing the behavior that caused it. A person can say, I want you back, but wanting someone is not the same as being prepared to give them consistency, honesty, communication, accountability, and emotional safety. Love needs more than emotion. Love needs capacity. It needs maturity. It needs responsibility. It needs two people willing to face uncomfortable truths rather than escaping whenever things become difficult. Maybe the person who left you is finally beginning to understand this. Maybe their return is not about repeating the old relationship but about finishing a chapter that was interrupted before its lesson was learned. Perhaps they are returning to apologize. Perhaps they are returning to explain what they could not explain before. Perhaps they are returning because they finally understand what they lost. Perhaps they are returning because life taught them lessons that your presence alone could never teach them. Sometimes people only understand the value of emotional security after experiencing emotional uncertainty elsewhere. They may discover that attention is easy to find but genuine understanding is rare. Attraction is easy to find but trust takes time. Conversation is easy to find but emotional intimacy is different. Someone can talk to hundreds of people and still feel lonely because very few people make them feel truly understood. Maybe you were one of those rare people. Maybe you offered a kind of love that they were not emotionally prepared to receive. And sometimes when people are not ready for healthy love, they run toward what feels familiar instead of what feels meaningful. Healthy love can actually feel frightening to someone who has learned to associate love with chaos, inconsistency, or emotional uncertainty. When someone has never experienced secure connection, genuine care can feel suspicious. Consistency can feel boring. Vulnerability can feel dangerous. They may push away the very person they secretly want because accepting love requires them to become emotionally honest. And honesty requires courage. So perhaps this person did not leave because you were not enough. Perhaps they left because they were not ready to become the person required to sustain the relationship. That distinction matters. We often personalize rejection. We think, maybe I was not beautiful enough, successful enough, interesting enough, loving enough, patient enough. But sometimes another person's inability to receive love has very little to do with the value of the love being offered.